Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Ronstadt Rise Smart Career Podcast, helping you transform your everyday work life into an exciting and rewarding career. Our show is turning out to be very valuable and insightful for our listeners. In fact, today's guest is helping us understand accuracy in our work. It goes way beyond executing tasks. We're joined by Keri Ohlrich, co-author of The Way of the HR Warrior. She helps us understand how to ask questions to ensure our work is complete, thorough, and, magic word, accurate. We'll learn how to ask questions that demonstrate curiosity rather than pushback or challenge. We'll hear how questions sound different as we progress through our career, and we'll actually hear the definition of accuracy at work. I'm your host, Kimberly Schneiderman. With 10 plus years of experience in coaching, resume writing, content development, and training, I'm passionate about delivering ideas, insights, tools, and resources to people like you, people focused on achieving their career goals. So far, we've had guests talking about the importance of networking at work, how to get unstuck in your career pursuits, understanding people's styles, and even best practices when it comes to written communication. Each episode has something different to offer and something that can be applied to your career and work habits today. Welcome to today's episode. I hope you find it as valuable as I did. Now, on with the show. Keri, welcome. Happy to have you here today.
Thank you. So honored to be here. Thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you. So to get started, how about we hear a little bit about your book? Tell us the title and kind of where you got started writing it.
So it's called The Way of the HR Warrior, and actually got started writing it because there was a need. So never thought I'd write a book, wasn't like in the plan on the vision board, as people like to say. Yeah. And it was simply because my colleague and I, Monica, looked around, and HR is a very important field. It's a very important profession. And I truly believe that. And in a way, it's kind of a love letter to HR saying we're really important and we need to kind of step up our game sometimes. And so we saw all these HR people learning about higher level theories, but not kind of doing the fundamentals. And Monica is a basketball player, so she loves fundamentals, right? And I love fundamentals, even though I didn't play basketball, but I just kind of love that you got to nail the fundamentals before you do more. My husband's an artist, and he's like, you have to know how to draw a face before you put the third eye on it, like Picasso, right? Knows how to draw a face, but then you can break all the rules. So we wrote this book because we saw this need of HR lacking these fundamental skills. And so we came up with our model, the charge model. So very cute. See, charge, warrior, it all works out. This is when you have creative people helping you edit the book. They're like, there's a better way to say that. So the charge model is really, what are those fundamental skills that an HR person needs? And then what we found through this and other people reading it is it really is for everyone. So it's courage, humility, accuracy, resiliency, goal orientation, and exemplary. And people who aren't in HR read it and went, you need that for everything. You kind of need that for life. And so we didn't mean to make kind of a leadership or career development book. It ended up that way, but it really started as a love letter to HR saying, like, we know how important this profession is and we all need to be warriors because it's a very important work.
I love that model, the charge model, and thinking about how it relates to everybody across the board, career development. And can you name those the acronym, the points of the acronym for us again?
Yes. So C is courage. Okay. H is, and then I'll watch me flip the letters. I always, so you would think I know how to spell charge, and I flip the letters all the time. But C is for courage, H is for humility, A is for accuracy, R is for resilience, G is for goal orientation, and E is for exemplary. And I might have even forgotten the resilience one when I said it first. So this is how,
I think we're good. I think we got it down. When I think of the fundamentals of developing one's career or developing within one's career, I think of how important it is to do good work. And therefore, that A of that charge acronym really jumps out at me, that accuracy. So can you tell me a little bit about what goes into that part of your model?
Yeah. So accuracy is one of my, well, I think I always say they're all my favorite. It's like having children. So like, which one's your favorite? But I really do kind of like accuracy.
All of
Um,
them.
so all of them. So the reason it started, so let me give you the kind of the reason it started and then how you can use it for career development.
Please.
So a lot of times people come to HR and say, I have an issue, and they've kind of already diagnosed it. And so I know this happens to everyone, right? So someone comes to you, a manager, a coworker, and they said, here's what I need for you to do. They've already kind of diagnosed it. And HR will typically get something like, I need a training because the team's not getting along. And I swear if I do a conflict management training, everything will work out. And then you ask, well, when do you need it? Yesterday. Okay. So there's always a time constraint. And again, it extrapolates to anyone because we all know what it's like for someone to come to us and say, Kimberly, I need help with this report tomorrow. And we tend to want to be pleasers at times. And we want, okay, sure. And you kind of assume that maybe, especially early in your career, you assume that the other people have kind of figured it out. And so you really just need to do this one thing. So in HR, what we've really found is this accuracy is that really truly what they need? Do they truly need kind of a conflict resolution training? What is it? What's the actual root cause? So we don't want to treat the symptom. We want to get to the root cause. And so for us, accuracy is about asking why. And it's always this balance because the client or whoever gave you this kind of work order, or this work request, they want it quickly. And you have to balance this kind of curious questioning without looking too almost insubordinate, especially when you're younger in your career. And so maybe just a couple questions. There's a book called The Five Whys, and it really is just getting to, but why are we doing it this way? So if you think about a child, they're always asking why. Well, why is the sky blue? Why is this? Why is this? And so that's why I'm saying you have to kind of balance, because especially if you're very junior and someone doesn't want to hear you ask why. So how do you figure out, oh, okay. So maybe you can say like, tell me the goal of this, or what are the success measures to this, and try to maybe ask those why questions in a slightly different way. But what you're really trying to do is get to that. What is the root cause of this issue? So it's not a training that you need. The root cause is one employee who's not doing well and hurting the rest of the team. Deal with that person. You don't need a training. So that accuracy is about understanding the root of it, and then also just being really curious. And so if I'm asking the why questions, I'm trying to figure out like, well, why is this happening? And how can I give you a solution that actually meets what you need? And sometimes people don't know what they actually need first. So you kind of have to, right, kind of ask those questions, be curious, and then build their trust too while you're asking those questions. Because there's nothing worse than someone asking you questions that you don't even trust. And you're like,
yeah. And I love how you positioned that as these are questions around the word why, but we're not using the word why in the actual question, because anybody that's taken any sort of psychology course around questioning, we know that a why question can almost always be a challenge. It can the receiver hears it as a challenge.
Yes.
So it's really important to couch those types of questions with other words so that they can be received in a more positive light. Like you said, tell me more about the goal of this.
Yes.
What else is happening that's influencing this?
Yeah. And I think too, that why, you're so right, especially if you don't have the trust. So when, if you and I work together for 10 years, I'm like, why are we doing this, Kimberly? And you're like, let me tell you, Keri, like no big deal. But if you and I don't know each other, or you're my manager and you're very hierarchical, which some managers are. And so like, I told you what to do. Why are you questioning me? Which is like, you don't want to get into that sticky wicket. But what I've seen is, hey, how can I don't want us to have to do this again, because let's make sure we're addressing the real issue. So do you think will this address the real issue, or can I maybe ask a few more questions of a few more people so I can make sure that what I'm delivering you is effective and will be kind of a one-time solution instead of a Band-Aid. And so that's kind of what we're trying to get at. And there's really great, if anyone's in a company that has folks like Six Sigma folks, go talk to them. They have all these beautiful root cause analysis tools. So you can really dig in. Like there's a whole industry and profession dedicated to figuring out root causes. But that's that accuracy that we see, especially in HR, because a lot of times we're treating symptoms and not the actual cause.
Gotcha. And when I think of that applies to the other types of positions in the corporate world beyond HR, I'm thinking of my boss giving me an assignment and me really needing to be able to dig into what the goal of the assignment is. And rather than just assuming that the boss has told me everything that there is to say about it.
Exactly. And I think that's one is so hard to do. So if you think of like a profile of people, there are some people who ask why all the time. That would be I always want to know why. So I get myself into trouble because I ask why. And like you said, it can be seen as a challenge. So especially junior in my career, I can ask why now because I'm older and so I've built up enough that people are going, well, she asked why for a different reason. But as a junior person, asking why like that would get me into trouble because I didn't know how to ask it. And so that asking the why questions is so important, especially junior in your career, because you're trying to figure out, I want to give you what you need in order for this to be successful. So asking like, what is the success metric on this? How do I know? Then there's people on the other side of the scale who accept what the manager tells them. And sometimes the manager doesn't quite know. I know managers don't want to hear this, but sometimes they don't really know. Like they might say, this is what I need. But I always know sometimes people ask me more questions. I'm like, maybe we don't need it quite this way, or maybe this would be a better format if you did it this way. And so junior folks who don't necessarily ask questions, this is good for them to kind of push themselves a little bit to ask that question because managers sometimes don't know. And there's some brainstorming that the manager can do with you, and then you really deliver a good product. So there's like the people who need to watch the way they ask, and there's people who need to kind of amp up and ask. And I remember there's this, I heard this story. I don't know if it's true, but I can easily see it's being true. That there was, where I used to work, there was this vice president, and he was kind of brainstorming, and he said, wouldn't it be great to have a blueberry beer? And this is years and years and years ago before, right? And the people in the office went, oh, okay, sure, we'll do it. And he was totally brainstorming. He didn't mean it to be like a work assignment. And they came back 6 months later with a blueberry beer. And he's like, what the heck why did you make a blueberry beer? Well, you said it once. And no one asked him a question. No one came back to him. And what's so sad is they thought they were doing great work because he said it. He then looked at them like, no one even asked me. No one asked me if this is what I wanted. No one checked in with me ever. So you can see where both sides were just like unhappy, and both had good intentions. Like he was just brainstorming like, oh, it's interesting. And they were trying to please him. So that accuracy, like, is it needed, is a great question. So
yeah, to your point, they didn't dig in and say, tell us more about that thought, or where did that idea come from? Or gosh, that's an interesting combination. What made you bring those two things together?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's hard. Like, this is where it's hard to be curious. And especially like I try to transport myself, 20 years back, 25 years backward. And it's like, oh, I'm sure I wasn't as curious as I am now because I didn't have the confidence. And also managers, like this is where you have to read the room a little bit. Some managers are like, I told you what to do and don't ask me a question. You're like, okay, maybe I'm not going to try this skill with that person, right? I will try a different colleague or manager to build up my muscle on doing that. But you do kind of have to read the audience and figure it out. But being curious and asking questions is a beautiful thing for people in their careers.
And I guess if you don't feel that you can go back to the original person to ask the question, there's probably a colleague that you could check in with before you start diving deep into things.
Yes. Yeah. Like having that peer network and talking, I guess, like, again, just learning this lesson of talking to your peers and be like, how would you do this? And it really is kind of that open and curious and growth mindset of I'm going to learn. And I don't have to, if you told me to do the blueberry beer, I'm not going to just go run and execute on it. I'm going to ask some questions. Because really you're trying to add value. And the blueberry beer, they wasted 6 months of their lives. And there's nothing more than employees don't appreciate is wasting their time on stuff, right? If you think about like, if you do really hard work and then you see it implemented, you're like, oh, it was all worth it. But then if you do all this really hard work and it goes on the shelf, that's when people get pretty disengaged. So it's in the best interest of the employees as well and the managers to ask questions and make sure and be accurate on what they need.
It's great. So I like it that the accuracy actually comes from what's needed, not from delivering on what's asked for.
Yes. Isn't that that's such a great mind shift change. It's like, there's so many, like, I just did what I was told kind of thing, but what is the value add to the business? What is the actual need? I remember talking to someone and they're like, we do all these reports. And the person said to them, do you think anyone cares about those reports? Well, they must. We do them all every week. We produce 5. They're like, stop doing them and see what happens and see what happens and see if anyone ever even asks you. And how sad was it that I think they stopped doing them for like a month and not one person asked, where is that report?
Oh,
yeah. I know. I was like, so sad, but like, so true. This is what happens. And people get like, I'm going to do it. And Kimberly asked for it 7 months ago. And so I'm going to keep doing it. And like, you only wanted it, Kimberly, for 1 week or, and so it's just, you got to find out what the need is and ask the client or ask your partners or ask the manager and figure out what that need is so you can achieve it. And that's amazing career development. That's who's going to be remembered. Like Kimberly asked me and I got this amazing report and that's what I actually needed versus Keri keeps sending a report that I don't even know why she sends it.
That sounds great.
Kimberly, they're going to promote you.
Great. I appreciate that. Thank you for that promotion, Keri. Keri, what else are people learning from your book? What are the other components? Give us a summary.
I think some of the other components and what people like a lot is the courage. So a lot of folks are like, I need to up my courage game, which is saying my truth, knowing my values, kind of having that confidence in myself and then having confidence to like say things to other people. We're hearing a lot now about resiliency just through the pandemic. I mean, this book was written before the pandemic, but we see more and more of how do you kind of figure out that resiliency and how do you bounce back in a profession like HR we do a podcast like this, and then my next call is someone wants to terminate someone, or then it's a hire. Like it's a lot of roller coasters. So how do you manage that resiliency? And I think the humility goes kind of hand in hand with the accuracy, which is a lot around asking questions and kind of knowing that you're not the smartest one in the room. And so there's so much knowledge out there. And then the goal orientation is really just in HR, it's tying the goals to the business. So in any profession, it's what you're working on, tying to the goals of the business and the revenue. Because if you're in the elevator, we always say this, if you're in the elevator with someone and the CEO is like, what you working on? And if you say something that CEO is like, that has nothing to do with how we're driving the business, you're in trouble. So just make sure you have goals. And then exemplary is really walking the talk, right? So especially in a profession like HR, we tell people, do your compliance training or have goals or have really good members on your team and take care of high performers first and remove low performers. And if we don't do that, people see that right away. And so if you're telling people, it's the old adage, right? If you're pointing the finger, 3 more point back at you. But like, if you're telling people that like, this is the most important thing and I do this really well, you better do it really well. And if you're complaining about them, your house better be in order. So I think that's kind of a quick summary of some of the charge and what people really like. I think exemplary sometimes is the hardest one. And courage is the one that a lot of people really want to focus on.
Well, thank you. I love that. I can't wait to hear what our readers think of your book. And the name of the book is The Way of the HR Warrior. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Keri, any last thoughts before we close out today's session?
No, I think I'm just excited that I'm so excited that people are always focusing on how to develop themselves. I'm still developing myself, even this book, even just thinking of every time I'm interacting with someone, I'm like, oh, that's a good way to do it. Oh, how do I do it that way? How do I ask the question in a better way? So it's just a continual evolution, and just be accurate with yourself as well, and what's important to you and what's important in your career. So I think that's it.
That's a great spin, being accurate to yourself. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That gives me something to think about as I move forward in my day. Keri, thank you so much for being here. I can't wait until our paths cross again. Keri, thank you so much for being here. Enjoyed talking with you today, and I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Ronstadt Rise Smart Career Podcast, helping you transform your everyday work life into an exciting and rewarding career. I thank our expert today and encourage you to tune in for our next episode, where we continue talking about how you can identify your career passions, set your career goals, and achieve everything you want to work toward in your career. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to this podcast and share it with your colleagues. You can also follow me at KJ Schneiderman, that's KJSCHNEIDERMAN, on Twitter or on YouTube on the Rise Smart Career channel. You can also sign up for coaching services in the Ronstadt Rise Smart portal, so you can directly benefit from everything we talk about.